Hey, Jamie.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing? Um, we are recording this episode a day after Mother's Day, so I
Yes.
wanted to tell you happy belated Mother's Day.
Thank you.
I hope
Yeah.
Paul took good care of you.
He did.
Good.
It was a beautiful day, and I now have a very clean car courtesy of Paul and the kids.
Oh,
So
nice,
I'm
nice.
thrilled.
I got Catherine a nice little gift basket of all the things that she enjoys, which
Oh.
is wine, chocolate, candy,
Oh yeah.
energy drinks. So yeah.
Perfect.
Um, So, from our last episode, we got a question,
Ooh.
and
Okay.
I was going to follow up with something that you had asked regarding Lane. And so, I'm going to take the question first, and then the question that you had for Lane. This is from Mike Walliser, who's a CCIM designee. He's
Okay.
someone I know. How does seasonal housing and residents affect business cash flows and the cap rate in the central business district? So, the last part of that question, Jamie, is the cap rate. Cap rates are just a measurement of value.
Okay.
The cash flows, as you can imagine, business owners make the majority of their cash in the fall, right? So
Yeah, that makes sense.
October, November, December, they stash all that cash to get through the winter. They're like
Yeah.
little groundhogs. They save it, and so that when summer comes around, spring and summer, they can they have their summer season. They make more cash. So yes, it is. Cash flows are very seasonal.
Hmm.
Do I think that that impacts cap rates? Not really. I think that
Can you
sales.
explain what cap rates are measuring
Okay, so cap rates are measuring value
on a
on
property?
a property.
Okay.
If the cap rate is, well, cap rates in the simplest form is a measurement of risk.
Okay.
If the cap rate is low,
Hmm.
there is very little risk. If the cap rate is high, there tends to be a lot of risk. For example, a Chick-fil-A is an investment grade asset that has very little risk because they make tons and tons of money.
Yes.
Most of your national retailers
Uh-huh.
are going to be strong, what we call strong credit tenants. The Where you get into mom and pops
Hmm.
or certain uses, they may have a higher risk, and so the cap rate is pushed up because of that risk. Or if the leases are ending soon, if there's volatility in the investment, then the investor may say, this has more risk, therefore, I'm not going to pay as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
So then the second thing was what Lane was talking, or the question you had asked Lane regarding the North Carolina Main Street program. Who
Yeah.
can participate in this program was the question. She says it's a very competitive application and it's
Oh,
largely targeted to municipalities with fewer than 50,000 residents.
interesting. Okay.
They have a defined, or they need to have a defined historic downtown, demonstrate a public private partnership, show commitment to economic revitalization, and typically start by completing what's called the 2-year Downtown Associate Community Program. So that's through North Carolina Main Street. So there's your answer to who
Yeah, that's
can
great.
participate in the Main Street program. Okay, today's episode is really cool because I'm very interested to get your perspective. So the episode today, and Jamie knows the title, but the episode today is titled "Why Certain Retailers Won't Come to Boone."
Hot
Now,
question.
we hear all the time on
Yeah.
social media, whether that's Facebook or Instagram, why can't we have certain blank retailer? Usually, the number one is Trader Joe's, but it's a very interesting relationship of space, the retailer, the market. And so there is a simple answer to the question, but there's also some other factors at play. And so I was going to talk to you about that. And I'm going to try, and I may not be able to do it online and show people that watch the video the material, but I'm going to at least show you here in the studio some really, really cool stuff. Jamie, what are either specific retailers, users, services that you feel like we don't have that you'd like to see in Boone?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody is going to say Trader Joe's. I took a casual poll of friends and family over the last couple of weeks, and almost everyone named Trader Joe's, which I think it's a unique, fun shopping experience for your groceries. And I also appreciate that they have a pretty big gluten-free selection. And a huge one I think is sporting goods, like a larger sporting goods store.
Okay. Like a Dick's or a Academy Sports.
Yes,
or
where you can quickly run and last minute grab the correct size cleats or shin guards or whatever it might be quickly and not have to Amazon it or whatever. Target came up a lot.
Okay.
People really, really love them some Target. I think kids' clothing in general. I pretty much exclusively order online, which is fine. I think I probably still would in some ways, even if there were a selection, just because I have my favorite brands, and I have all girls, and they're rather picky. But sometimes it does get old if you just need like a pair of jean shorts and you want to like quickly run out and grab some.
Right.
So
I also took this poll over the weekend.
Nice.
So every Saturday night, we go over to Catherine's mom and dad's house for dinner. We call it steak night because usually Andy
yes.
serves up steaks.
I'm coming to steak night next week.
Salmon sometimes, but mostly steak. And so I have this huge group of people, and I asked them this question, and it was very funny what exactly came up. A lot like you, some of my relatives mentioned Aldi, Biscuitville, Planet Fitness, Buffalo Wild Wings, Panda Express, Dunkin' Donuts, Crumble Cookies, Duck Donuts. Also, the Target and the Trader Joe's. My brother-in-law actually mentioned something very interesting. He talked about like a Ross Marshalls. Because they have one down in Wilkes, and he's like, well, if Wilkes can have one, why can't we? And then we got into this whole, not necessarily heated, but discussion about a much-needed gas station in East Boone, because they live out in the Parkway area, and they're like, after you pass Bamboo, there's no gas.
That's
true. So maybe we can work on that. So like I said earlier, there is a simple answer, which I will give our listeners, but ask them also to listen to the rest of this episode, because there's a lot more to it than just these two things. So the first is demographics. It's understanding people and their income. The second, in my opinion, is the availability of space. So in order to have that Target, you need 175,000 square foot box. Or in order to have that Planet Fitness, you need to have a 18 to 20,000 square foot box. One of the factors that I think is important outside of those two things is understanding the market size. So you came from Raleigh, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Raleigh in itself is what we call a primary market. It is so large
Yeah.
because it has so many people. It has a very thriving economy, a lot of jobs, a lot of people. When we look at secondary markets, these are kind of outliers, but they're still strong. They're not a Raleigh or a Charlotte, but consider maybe a Triad or a Wilmington, North Carolina, or Greenville or Hickory, right? So when we need something in Boone, you people like you and I typically will travel to one of two places. We're either going to
Right.
Winston-Salem, Greensboro, or going down to Hickory.
Yep.
And if it's really, really important, you're going down to Charlotte. But Boone in itself is considered, in the world of commercial real estate, what we call a tertiary market. So these are very small markets where there's not a lot of people. The economic factors aren't quite as strong. So it is hard to convince the retailer who wants people and money
Yeah.
to come to these markets. I'd put in my notes places like Brevard,
Okay.
Shelby, North Carolina. It takes a while. I'm sure people out on the Outer Banks, right?
Right.
Those are all kind of tertiary markets because they have to drive a significant amount of time before getting somewhere. So tertiary markets typically have a smaller population base, lower density, and less predictable demand. Okay, so what do retailers actually care about? And in order to get a retailer here, we just have to understand retail real estate in general. And one of the things that I don't think that people understand is that a lot of these retailers are built on the franchisee franchisor relationship. When I say that, do you understand franchisors and franchisees?
I think so.
Okay, so well, let me hear it in your own words, and then I'll
Okay,
see if
yeah,
I
you
can
can
clarify.
correct me if I'm wrong. So, for example, I guess Chick-fil-A uses different terminology, right? But you have like an operator
Mm-hmm.
who gets trained by Chick-fil-A corporate and they have a certain buy-in
Right.
and then they own and operate the local location.
So the operator is the franchisee,
Right.
and Chick-fil-A corporate is the franchisor. So a lot of these brands that we see all around town are operating from that franchisor-franchisee relationship. And so the franchisor, the Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
they care about population counts, household income, traffic counts. This is very important. So this is why we see all of those national retail tenants on Blowing Rock Road, because Blowing Rock
Right.
Road is the core commercial corridor. It's the place where I think right there at the Wendy's intersection, it's as high as 40,000 cars, over 40,000 cars per day going up and down Blowing Rock Road.
I believe it.
Yep. If you're ever trying to get to the post office and you get
Yes.
stuck at more than 3 cycles of the light, you're very frustrated. Other things that retailers consider: daytime population, tourism, which is actually in our favor as a community, growth trends, housing permits, and competition. One of the other factors that retailers look at is as brokers, we call it drive time analysis. So a lot of retailers will say, how long does it take Jamie to get to this location? So, and typically they look at it from either one of two ways. either miles, 1, 3, and 5 miles, or they look at it from drive time, which is typically 5, 10, 15 minutes. So how many people within a 5-minute drive time can we get to this location? How many people from 10? How many people from 15?
Yeah.
So the really cool thing that I'm going to show you today is data.
Love it.
And one of the, so data is really important to retailers. Not all data is built the same, but we use primarily 2 data sources as a company to look at where people are going, demographic information. So through CCIM, we have a subscription to something called IntelliSite. It used to be called Site to Do Business, but what IntelliSite does is it gives us access to what's a company called Esri. And so what Esri does is they take a huge amount of census data and Department of Labor data, and they kind of aggregate it all into a usable form. The other one, which I'm going to show you today, is called Placer AI. Now, what Placer AI is a data service in which they track everyone's cell phone data, which I understand could be a little intrusive, but
Yeah,
your cell
fascinating.
phone is tracking where you're going, how long you're staying there, and so some way, somehow, they are able to use that information and then put it in a format that people can understand. When I show you this, I'm going to give you some caveats here. Boone is measured from a census perspective, as a micro MSA. So we have our own micro metropolitan statistical area,
Okay.
which is, for the purpose of the federal government, the entire county is the
Okay.
MSA. Let me try and give you another good example. When we look at a market like Charlotte, North Carolina, their MSA is probably at least 10 plus counties, going all the way up to like Iredell, all the way down to Rock Hill, South Carolina, going all the way over to Gastonia, and going all the way up to like an area like Concord, Kannapolis. That is their,
That's a huge
yeah.
area. Okay.
So you can imagine that we're just looking at our one little county.
Yeah.
And then what I'm going to show you is on a what we call a rolling 12-month basis. So for the last 12 months, we're going to look at this Placer AI data. And you may not be able to see this like super, super well, but okay, so for the entire Boone MSA over the last year, there was a resident population of around 55,000 people. So
Yep.
what Placer AI is really good at is looking at that tourism segment and how people come into our market. So this will tell you basically when how many people are coming in, and so these huge spikes right here, you can imagine that those are game days. Because we're not showing this on the screen, I'm trying to think and talk of how to explain this to people not seeing this online.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I'm showing you is really cool. It's kind of like a heat map of where people are coming from over the last year by county. So you can imagine that our neighboring counties, they don't have the same goods and services as us. So typically they're coming to Boone for something that they need. So for example, Ashe County gets or 1.5 million people in the last 12 months came from Ashe County into Boone or Watauga County as a whole in order to do something. But what's really interesting is that Mecklenburg County and Wake County are also really high up there, saying that people from Charlotte and Raleigh want to come up here and visit, spend money, and it goes so far as to down to, we can see here on this map that down here in Charleston or the beach, they're still coming all the way up here to Boone. All right. So the next thing, because I talked to you about this before before the show, the top visited places. One of the things that Placer AI does is track the top visited places. So over the last 12 months, what do you think? We'll see how good your commercial real estate retail prerogative is, or what do you think were the top? I'm going to expand it to 15 or 20, or 10 to 15. What do you think were in the top 10 to 15 places that people went when they came to Boone, North Carolina?
In terms of retailers?
It could be anything.
Anything, yeah. Okay, so I'm definitely going to say Walmart.
Okay.
And that's not because Walmart's a hot destination, but it's the only place you can get a lot of things. Chick-fil-A. I've seen that line every day, so I know you guys are going to Chick-fil-A. In all of Watauga County?
Yeah. But remember that Boone is the core, so
right,
probably
but Blowing
most
Rock too, right? Is in Watauga County.
Yeah,
so.
Blowing Rock's in Watauga County.
I mean, App State,
Okay.
for sure. Football games.
Right.
Top 15. Downtown Boone? Or do I have to
No,
differentiate?
it doesn't. Now, we could get into, if we had all day, we could get into the, there are very niche geographical areas that Placer AI can map. Downtown Boone is actually one of them.
Okay.
But these are all good places, but I'm gonna for our listeners and for you, I'm gonna run through kind of these top 15, and you tell me if they all make sense.
Okay.
As you can imagine,
Yes.
and we've talked about this in the past, Appalachian State University is the primary draw to our region, right?
That makes
so
sense, yeah.
in the last 12 months, 4.2 million people
That's
were
crazy.
recognized on campus.
Are
Now-
those all unique people?
I believe so.
Okay.
Now, I don't work for Placer, but
Sure.
it's my understanding that if you went on campus, you did something, then you left campus, it's
tracking the
it's
unique
tracking.
cell phone. Okay.
But like you said, the Watauga Village Shopping Center, where the Walmart is located, is next, right? So the shopping center itself, where the Food Lion, Sweet Frog, all that is located, Michael's.
Yeah. Okay.
4 million people in the last.
Again, makes sense if you've been to the parking lot.
The Walmart on an annual basis, or at least on the last 12 months, saw 2.9 million people. You said before the show that in terms of neighborhood shopping centers or what we call grocery anchored centers, one of your favorites is New Market Center, right?
Yeah.
Where the Lowe's Foods is.
Very convenient to school and home.
Okay. That center, and my office is also located at New Market Center, 2 million people.
Wow.
So the second highest grocery anchored center. What was surprising is then it's Boone Mall, 1.9 million people, and Shops at Shadowline, 1.5 million people.
That's lower than New Market?
the
Shops
mall,
at Shadowline?
yeah, the mall, and
Oh,
which
wow.
is very
That's
surprising
shocking to me.
because you and I both we talked about Harris Teeter,
I love Harris Teeter.
and you would think that that would perform
Yeah.
better than New Market Center. What I also found very interesting is because it's kind of run down, Boone Heights Shopping Center, so where Los Alcarias
Oh,
is,
yeah.
they see 1.1 million people over the last year. And then the
Wow.
Chick-fil-A, so your
Chick-fil-A is
Chick-fil-A,
lower. Okay, well, it's, yeah, smaller, but
your the one Chick-fil-A that we have in Boone generates 979,000 people, so nearly a million people going to that Chick-fil-A. And then rounding out the top 10 is our new Sheetz gas station,
okay.
950, around 958,000 people
Wow.
going to that. And that Sheetz is fairly new.
It
So
is, yeah.
that's kind of surprising. When we go past the top 10, we see some other retailers such as McDonald's. That McDonald's is very busy. The Harris Teeter, Lowe's Hardware, Publix, and the Student Union. Just since I have the top 20 pulled up here, the Harris Teeter. So when we look at grocers, which are a predominant part of retail, the Harris Teeter brings in 863,000. The Lowe's Food about 680,000, and the Publix about 800,000, 796. So those are all strong metrics. Let me.
So Food Lion's nowhere even
Food Lion, at least the one.
in Watauga Village.
Yeah, the Food Lion out by in Deep Gap does better
Oh.
than the one in town, which in terms of visits. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can.
I actually feel like that might make sense to me in my head.
And then we can see some other popular retailers like Cookout. Shops on the Parkway. You talked about Blown Rock. Shops on the Parkway in the last 12 months only generated 502 visits. So
There's
half a
nothing-
million.
There's not much there.
Well, and it's also kind of, when some folks from Raleigh bought Shops on the Parkway. And so Tanger, most people know Tanger outlet malls, right? They used to own Shops on the Parkway,
Right.
but then they sold it, and it was trying to go through this like redevelopment mantra or plan. And since then, I think it's been very difficult to convince the national retailer to take space.
Interesting.
But just rounding out kind of the top 30 in some local places that we know here in Boone, Cookout, Comeback Shack does 500,000 people, 500,000 people a year go into Comeback Shack. That's a favorite of everyone. Starbucks, Panera, and then the Food Line in town, 437,000 people. So, and then Placer lets us look at, when people are coming, what time of day, what day of the week. And so very interesting information. Now, if we think of, we can do this one of two ways, because I have been working this through in my mind. We said earlier that App State is this huge draw. We could look at App State and see and kind of do analysis, or we could take one of these neighborhood shopping centers and look at what retailers might fit. Do you have a preference?
I think our listeners are going to want to go with the retailers.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's take a neighborhood shopping center, and for this example, which one would you prefer? Would you prefer shops at not Watauga Village? So your options are Watauga Village, New Market Center, or Shops at Shadowline?
Shops at Shadowline.
Shops at Shadowline. All right. So when we click in here, sorry, you'll love this. 1.5 million people came to Shops at Shadowline last year. What Placer does is that they can get bring all this data down. So 1.5 million people, they were there for an average of about half an hour, which I think is good for retailers. It'll break it down to stuff that is in the nitty gritty, but more important to retailers. What is the frequency of their visits, along with how many visits per square feet. But one of the things that we look at, you're gonna love this. So these are the tenants that are there. And one of the things that I love about Placer is that it will not only tell us how many people in the last 12 months went there, but it also ranks how good that Harris Teeter is compared to others, right? So if you're a Harris Teeter real estate exec listening to this, I apologize, but your Harris Teeter here in Boone in the last 12 months saw 863,000 people. It ranks 42nd out of 149 stores, so pretty strong. And hold on just a second here. And then the other kind of major retail tenant in there is so that shopping center, Jamie, is what we call anchored by Harris Teeter.
Yeah.
And so typically these big retail centers have what we call either an anchor or a junior anchor. And so at Shops at Shadowline, there are actually two. The anchor is Harris Teeter. The junior is that Dollar Tree next door.
Right. Yep.
Because that is kind of the second largest box. I think it's like 8,000 or 9,000 square feet. And then the rest of the shops that are on the left or the right of Harris Teeter are what we call small shop space. So typically 20 wide or 20 or 25 feet wide by 60 deep. So they're like 1,200 square foot bays. Some tenants will take more than one bay. Some tenants only take one. So, but the Dollar Tree is very strong for, or it's a what we call an ideal retailer for our market based on people and demographics. So Placer will look at how many people are going to these retailers, but one of the really cool things it does is it says, well, where did these people come from? So this is kind of like what I'm showing Jamie is like a heat map of where people are coming from when they go to Shops at Shadowline over the last 12 months. And then it gives us some comparison data as compared to the state when it comes to economics. What I was going to show you was something called this. Okay. A void analysis. So last episode we talked about vacancy. And as you can imagine, there's very little vacancy in these retail centers, mostly because there are large surface parking lots. So retailers love parking.
Yes.
The customer also loves
Parking.
parking. But what I'm showing you right now is what we call, and what Placer calls, a void analysis. So imagine for a second that I don't want to go this extreme, but imagine Harris Teeter was not there. Okay. And it was my job to, the landlord had called me and said, Harris Teeter's leaving. We need to backfill or fill this space with a new tenant. We could go to Placer and do what's called a void analysis and see, well, what would work well in the Shops at Showline Shopping Center based on demographics, based on people, based on income. It's not necessarily based on what we call co-tenancy, even though co-tenancy is important. So before I get locked and loaded here, okay. What you're looking at is a top, and you'll find this so funny because it mentions some of the brands that you talked about earlier. What you're looking at is a void analysis of Shops at Showline with who the prospective tenant is, how long do they typically take to drive, where the nearest one is in terms of location, how many are they operating in the state right now along with the U.S. This is really important. It's called their expansion rate. So, and Placer is looking at their expansion rate both within the state and nationwide. And then what they do is they aggregate all this data and they say, well, based on what we know, this is what we call the relative fit score. So we think that basically if it's sky high, it would fit well. If it's low, may not fit as well. I think that based on the research that I did over the last couple of days, I don't always think that in commercial real estate we should hang our hat on a relative fit score because it doesn't tell the whole story, right? Sure. There's more to it than people and income. Like I said, there's also a space factor. There's also that franchisee-franchisor relationship. If the Harris Teeter was to leave, it could be backfilled. The highest one on this list is a Costco.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. The next, or with Costco, usually comes Sam's Club. They're also ranked pretty high. Wegmans, which is another grocer that has been expanding hard in markets like Charlotte and Raleigh, is a very big competitor to Harris Teeter. That would also work. But funny enough, the Dick's Sporting Good has a 94.9% fit score.
See, the people want a sporting goods store.
And then it gets into some other restaurants. One user that we've been talking to that I really like on this list is a concept called Uptown Cheapskate. It's kind of like Plato's Closet. You know, Plato's Closet that's at right? Newmarket. It's kind of like that, but leveled up a couple of notches. So they take really nicer stuff and do that same thing.
Is Whole Foods on the list?
Is Whole Foods on the list? No, it is not. But I'm just gonna. Well, you pick one of these because we're gonna dig a little deeper. If you had to pick one of these retailers, which one would you want to have there?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I do love a Wegmans. Okay. But the idea of Costco sounds great too.
Well, let's choose the Wegmans for a second.
Okay.
So what the reason that relative fit scores don't tell the whole story is because it is really this demographic fit score, right? So this is 63. What Placer AI can do is this thing called a match analysis, which I thought was really cool. And it's what the match analysis is doing is it's looking at things that are hyper important to the retailer, income, education. So we would look at something like this if the Wegmans rep was in town, he had made a site visit. Let's look at some demographical data. And let me also say that all these national retailers have access to this information,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
The locally, not a lot of people know this, but the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce is now using Placer AI data to help its members. A huge retailer that we have in town, Mass General Store, they use Placer AI data for their business. So if I scroll down here, the reason that a Wegmans more than likely would not work in Boone, North Carolina, is because of this. They look at a trade area population, and as you can see, even for shops at Shellline, our trade area population is around 41,891 people, where Wegmans needs to see a trade area of 222,000 people.
Oh, wow.
So they just need more people than what our market has. They also want to see a more affluent customer, right? So a Wegmans, as compared to Shops at Shellline, is only scoring 41 out of 100 because of the spread between household incomes. And then it looks at, like I said, the education and looks at the age. So we could spend literally all day in different Placer AI scenarios, but I wanted to show that to you.
That's fascinating. I think that it's just so interesting because I think when I think about the people who are going to a Harris Teeter or a Publix or whatever, it feels like those people would also visit Trader Joe's. The listener feedback was overwhelmingly, why can't we have a Trader Joe's? And I understand what you're saying about space and demographics. I feel like
because
anecdotally it doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean?
Because Trader Joe's wants to see more people and they want to see a more affluent customer. So they need people making a lot of money.
It just seems like Harris Teeter would have more affluent customers than a Trader Joe's, but maybe I'm wrong. Because Trader Joe's feels to me like, oh, that's where I can go and get a lot of bang for my buck. Do you know what I mean? This is all anecdotally, of course, too. So it's just like, it's my feelings.
But don't get me wrong. I would love to see a Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that it would do very well. I just think that we have a hard time convincing the Trader Joe's real estate team that we have the demographics that match what they need in order for that store to be successful. I think there's also some other factors at play and we're going to talk about, for example, logistics. They have to figure out how to get goods and material to a place like Boone. So we talked about the top 10 to 20 places that the market is seeing. We talked about App State being number one. As it relates to other, found this to be very interesting as it relates to other campuses across the state. App State is eighth, the highest campus that people gravitate to is UNC Chapel Hill. 18.81 million people a year are going to the campus in Chapel Hill, followed by State, Duke, ECU, UNCG, Wake Forest, UNC Charlotte, then us, and then UNC Wilmington and Western kind of rolls out the top 10. Okay. Retailers, I wrote this down. Retailers know more about consumer behavior in your town than most local governments do. I think that's very true. They understand who wants to shop, to come. They understand people, demographics, income better than most. So why retailers might avoid these smaller markets? Population, we've talked about. These stores need volume. That these stores also have thresholds, right? They need to generate a certain amount of money to remain viable.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think about kind of the seasonality of our market.
Yeah.
I think really the reality of why we got a Publix is because there are so many Floridians
yeah.
that are here during the summer, and they're like, "Oh, I need my Publix.
Yeah.
I need to do my shopping as I know how to do it." One of the other issues that we're seeing kind of overall in the market right now that does impact retailers is labor. So the ability to hire people to work in that store.
Okay.
And this is an issue within the western part of the state. The other reason that retailers might avoid a smaller market is, as I was talking about, logistics and distribution. How does the retailer get supply to their stores? And we only have two ways into Boone. You either come from the east on 421 or you come up from the south on 321. Yeah. And, the retailer has to have a plan to not only staff the store, but to get what they need from typically a distribution hub. For example, the Lowe's distribution hub that may serve the one on Blowing Rock Road, the one over in Ash, the one over in Banner Elk, is more than likely serviced from a distribution center that is outside of Statesville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so they put all this material on an 18-wheeler, and then they have good logistics, I-77, to get up to 421 to come back over. A retailer, I wrote this down, a retailer doesn't just open a store, they create a permanent logistics obligation. And I wrote down that Sheetz is a good example of this, that, I think that when Sheetz came to Boone, they were strategically filling the dots per se. So they had done that Sheetz down in Wilkesboro.
Yeah.
And then they had the Sheetz further down 421 in Yadkinville.
Yep.
And in order to expand, they have to give consideration to how are they going to get material from, because typically what a retailer does, Jamie, is that they load up a huge tractor trailer and they'll go distribute it to a number of stores.
Okay.
A retailer doesn't just typically have one 18-wheeler that's loaded for themselves. The other thing that is impacting retail, in my opinion, is construction costs. So, obviously rent is sky high. but the other part of that is building any type of retail, whether they're doing what we call ground up retail, where you have a good example of this is like the Seven Brew on Blown Rock Road.
Right,
That's
yeah.
considered ground up retail. We took a site, we built something on it, whereas some retailers are building out space. The construction costs continue to be sky high. And then the last thing that I thought in just small markets overall was this tourism volatility, and this is especially relevant for Boone. For example, do you notice how town just gets extremely crazy on football game day
Yes,
weekends
it's
or
crazy.
leaf season,
Yeah.
right? That October, mostly the month of October, ski season, there's move-in weekend.
Graduation
Or
weekend.
we just had
We just lived
graduation.
that. Yeah.
How long on Friday did it take you to get?
Too long. It was insane.
So I think one of the considerations that retailers have is why would we spend all this money in a market like Boone if it's only going to have this seasonal activity,
Yeah.
right? So again, going back to that year round, in order for a retailer to be successful, they have to have year round success.
Sure.
And do you know who's here year round?
Us.
People like me and you, right?
Yeah.
It's not the visitors, it's not the students, it's people like me and you who've bought property here, have jobs here,
And there are only 55,000 of us. Right?
exactly. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay. What do you think are some retailers that would thrive in a tertiary market? And I think our listeners are gonna hate these answers, but there's a reason why. Did you look at the sheet before I gave it to you?
I glanced at it, but I
Okay.
don't remember
Okay.
which ones. I mean, I think after this conversation, I have a pretty good idea of
Okay.
what's
So what do
likely
you
on
think is a
there.
retailer in Boone that is highly successful purely based on the size of the market? Now that we've talked about people, demographics, income.
Bojangles.
Oh, okay. I would actually maybe post episode I will look at the two Bojangles.
That was just a guess because there are two of them, and it feels like it fits. But
The Bojangles is dealing with a big labor problem right now. I've heard that people aren't exactly excited about their Bojangles visits lately because of labor. Do you want the answer?
yeah,
Okay.
give it to me.
Discount retail. So Dollar General,
Yes.
Dollar Tree are two retailers.
Dollar General is everywhere.
Exactly. It's like and what's so cool about Dollar General is they are trying to fill that void, fill that gap to where you don't have to come all the way into town. For example, there are Dollar Generals out
Meat camp.
in meat camp
Yeah.
because they want to fill the need for the consumer to not have to come all the way to New Market Center, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's eggs, loaf of bread, milk, basic consumer goods. That is why Dollar Generals are in the middle of nowhere
They
and
really
do
are, yeah.
very, very well. And typically, and I can speak to those two, they are smaller footprints. A typical Dollar General is somewhere around 10,000 square feet. So that's small, compared to a 90,000 square foot Harris Teeter. That thing
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah.
And this is after their expansion or their last expansion. And so with that smaller footprint, they get to have lower overhead. The other I found this interesting. The other retailer that should do well in a tertiary market is Tractor Supply.
Interesting.
This notion of rural oriented retail, and if we had more time, I would pull the Tractor to Supply to see how they're performing against
Yeah.
other tractor supplies. But the last thing here was experience based businesses. And I just chuckled at myself when I read this because it defines Boone so well. Breweries,
Oh, yeah.
boutique restaurants, outdoor recreation, and entertainment are especially strong in tourism markets. So,
Yeah.
A&B, Boonshine,
Yeah.
Lost Province, all strong draws to, in my opinion, to Boone. Boutique restaurants. The last episode we talked about just
Yeah.
how awesome downtown Boone is because of eclectic, out of the box restaurants.
Yeah.
We do see a lot of outdoor recreation. I think there's a reason that the Alpine Coaster is over in Avery County, but also outdoor recreation like tubing, like the New
Oh, yeah.
River
The New River.
in the summertime is a big economic draw. And then entertainment, we talked our last episode about Boomerang and hope people will come. But as we try and wrap up here, we talked about the tertiary market. Why is Boone attractive? There are some fundamental reasons, but why? If you were a retailer, Jamie, why do you think you would want to come to Boone?
Why would I or why wouldn't I?
Well, either
Based
one.
on I mean, I think based on this conversation, it's been really enlightening. I think there are only 55,000 of us year round, like you said, and I'm assuming, does that not include students?
It should.
Oh, it should. Okay.
Well, no, I take that back. I
Okay.
don't think. I think that is us as a county and the municipalities.
Okay.
It should take them out.
Okay.
Keep
Yeah,
going.
so there aren't enough of us to sustain some of these bigger box stores that so many of us want. And like you said, it's just so seasonal. So I mean, it makes a ton of sense.
So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and explain to you, bring it hyper local to
Yeah.
Boone. Why do I think a retailer should come to Boone, and what makes it difficult for them? Obviously, Appalachian State University is a huge draw. We talked about 4.2 million people in the last 12 months coming to that campus. They are coming from very affluent areas of the state. And like we said last time, we are known for recreation and tourism. Tourism is an attractive factor. Our college population is an attractive factor. The fact that Boone acts as the regional hub, right?
Sure.
So when we think about the high country as a region, Avery, Ashe, Watauga, Northern Caldwell counties, everyone naturally comes to Boone.
Yeah.
And that we do have affluent visitors. If you went and took the economic or the pay scale of communities like Linville Ridge, Grandfather Mountain Country
Yeah.
Club, Diamond Creek, they may not have necessarily what they need over in Avery County.
Right.
Guess where they're coming? They're coming to Boone.
Yeah.
Even though, time out, kind of Boone tea, but not Boone
Oh,
necessary
okay.
Boone tea. Supposedly, I've heard on good authority and not confirmed.
Okay.
I got to throw all these disclaimers out that they are going to get a Harris Teeter out in Avery County, out there by
Where?
So do you know where the Lowe's Hardware is
Yes.
on Tynecastle?
Yes.
Kind of That's what I've heard.
Wow,
So all
interesting.
of you
Okay,
affluent
Harris.
people of Avery County that don't want to come to, I have heard that Lowe's Foods
Yeah,
does very, very well.
I'm sure.
So, because God knows that they aren't going to the food line.
No.
So, yeah, I thought that I just
so
thought of that and I
interesting.
was like,
Yeah.
yeah, a little Boone tea for you today. Why is Boone difficult? You can imagine that really nothing in Boone is easy, but, and we've talked about this some, there's very limited land
Yeah.
for development, the topography of that land. So when someone comes in, they got to put in what we call a pad site, and they have to do grading and infrastructure. That's all very expensive. Parking, there's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of, and we talked about that at the beginning of the show. Both the retailer and the consumer love
Parking.
big surface open air parking lots. Housing is hard, and I think that goes into the labor, infrastructure, traffic, and the. My notes here say entitlement complexity, but another way to say that is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago was just the process of development through
Sure.
the municipality. There's a high barrier to entry. And Boone may look larger than. I think what I want listeners to understand is that Boone shouldn't be judged by its numbers.
Yeah.
I think Boone should be judged by the way the community is, the people, the fact that we have needs, and not those needs aren't always going to be met by a mom and pop local business. And this isn't an episode to like shun or hate
Yeah.
on local business, because I own and operate a local business, you
Yeah.
as well. But it's just a realization that we do have needs that we shouldn't always have to go online for.
Right.
So looking future, what I guess what would you foresee the retail environment in Boone looking like? Like, do you think that Boone wins as a community because we get a Trader Joe's or we get a Target? We get an Aldi. What do you think the future of
Yeah.
retail looks like?
I mean, I think that Boone wins because, like you said, of our community, and those are all just bonuses. And I think one of the things about living in the high country is that you adapt, right? And so I know a lot of us are transplants, but have been here a long time, and you really do learn to live without, or to stop by Trader Joe's on your way home from wherever. Winston really isn't that far for your Costco run, and so I think that Boone is always growing, and it always surprises me when something new and fun does pop up, and that's great. But
Whether that's maybe you can clarify for me.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's regardless of if it's a national credit tenant or if it's a local business?
yeah, I think it's regardless, and I think that the spirit of Boone is that we figure it out together, and I love it when a local business fills a need instead of a big national brand. But I mean, either way, I think that we figure it out together. I think that, I mean, especially post Helene, we saw how a community can come together and solve problems big and small. And, certainly one of those is filling those needs, like you said, so that we don't have to go online.
The one big, or yesterday I showed Catherine a reel on IG of there's I don't if it's a company or it's a business that's doing in Wilkes that's getting ready to open this week. I think it's called Sprouts. So if you're listening to this, I'm sorry if I butchered the name, but they took in the biggest need in our community right now from a retail, it's somewhat retail, is this indoor recreation,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And they're doing indoor recreation for, I think, you know, small, children prior to preteen, and have that party space. It's a great need. Again, that goes, all these people who are saying, oh, we need indoor recreation. My response to that is we don't have a space for it to happen. A lot of people who come to me professionally say, I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm like, go find a tract of land and go build your site-specific building because it just doesn't exist. And I'm sorry, it's
Right.
I wish I could just snap my fingers and say, poof, here's your perfect building to do exactly what you want. One of the things that is important in retail that I wanted to mention is this notion of omni-channel. Omni-channel, in its simplest form, is this one smooth experience no matter how you interact with them. So, like, for example, you mentioned Target earlier. Someone may go online, look something up on the Target app, may use that as a catalyst to go to the store or order it online. It's kind of how, or they may see a social media post. It's how is that customer interacting with that retailer? That I think is going to become more and more prevalent in the future of retail real estate. I think the other thing that retail is kind of moving towards, or is just a smaller store format. So the cost of operating retail is sky high, and so these retailers are going to try and figure out how to do more in less space, and which would make you think that some of our small shop or retail spaces that our company has in all these mixed use buildings would be very viable. But the reason, a lot of people in our community, after they say, "Where is my Trader Joe's?" they say, "Why isn't anything in the bottom of these mixed use buildings?"
Right.
I think that one of the primary reasons nothing is in the bottom of these mixed-use buildings is the cost of construction to build it out. Finding a tenant who has enough money, we call it capitalized, to build out the space is very, very difficult. That's why typically you're seeing national retail tenants. And we can get more into that another day. But that is also mixed. The fact that mixed-use developments typically have a large number of people above them, you would think that they would naturally gravitate towards the retail. I haven't even looked at my watch, and we've been at it
There's a lot to cover.
I just want to give you, I've done a lot of the talking today, so I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions or concerns before regarding retail or retailers that you want to ask based on all this, because I know I've overloaded you today.
No, it was good stuff. I mean, I think just a couple of comments. I think this really helped me understand the landscape of our retail in Boone. For example, when Big Lots left, I think we all were holding our breath, like wondering what was going to come. And then it was essentially replaced by something very similar. But what you were saying about our demographic looking for those discount stores, that makes so much sense. I love the idea of having some of those bigger stores having smaller footprints. And it made me think we were in Hawaii, which is odd. We were on Kauai, so and it's kind of a similar market to Boone in a way, which sounds really odd, but it's a really small population with not as affluent maybe, but then huge bursts of really affluent visitors because of tourism. But anyway, this doesn't have the part that I'm getting to is we got stuck there because of the ice storm. And then we finally got off the island and ended up in LA. And we got stuck there because all of the flights were so backed up that we could not get home to Charlotte. And so the airline put us in a airport hotel or whatever. But my luggage got lost. So I was in LA, had no luggage, and walked to a Target because I saw it on the map. And I was like, I need a toothbrush. I need to change the clothes.
Yes.
Like. And it was so funny. I got there, and it was a mini Target, and I had never seen one before. And they had this tiny little section. And I was like, all right, well, they have one shirt in my size and one pair of pants in my size. I guess this is what we're getting. But it was cool. It was it was a much smaller footprint.
And another national retailer that is moving in that direction of smaller scale retail, and one that I think that does it very well is Walgreens.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been over to Ash lately, but in Jefferson, next to their huge neighborhood shopping center where the Food Lion is,
Yeah.
right there by the hospital, to the left of the hospital entrance is a micro
Walgreens.
Walgreens
Oh, I haven't seen that.
that is only, I want to say, a few thousand square feet, right?
Wow.
And it's hyper focused on pharmacy, right?
Wow.
Not necessarily all the stuff that you would get in a regular Walgreens.
Yeah.
So I think that retailers moving to a smaller footprint creates more efficiency, makes a lot of sense. Because really, there are few. I think the consumer gets focused on just a few things, not a lot of things. It's funny that you brought up the when Big Lots left. Personally, so it's like it's over 30,000 square feet, that one box.
Yeah.
Personally, I thought and I was hoping that they would do what we call demise, so split it in half and create two kind of junior boxes. Would have made a very good Planet Fitness, which is what something in the marketplace. As we wrap up, it's funny because this week on Sunday, I'm going to Las Vegas.
Yay.
And I'm going to kind of the Super Bowl of retail real estate. And it's called ICSC Vegas.
Okay.
And so what I'm hoping will happen is we'll get an opportunity to tell people about Boone, North Carolina, tell them what we need and why we need it, and see if my word of the year, Jamie, is storytelling.
Nice.
And I want to tell the story of Boone, North Carolina, and that it doesn't matter what these numbers say. There is need. We would love to have you. We want to generate tax revenue. We want to be. We don't want to be in a place where we have to keep going to Charlotte or Winston-Salem, or the alternative, ordering it online. Yeah. personally hate breaking down all the boxes
Oh.
that show up at my house
Yes.
every week. And
Yeah.
I'd prefer to spend that same dollar here locally in my community. Okay. This has been an incredible conversation. Anything else retail, real estate related?
I mean, honestly, we could go all day,
We
but
could.
I think we should cut it off for now.
Okay. I, as we wrap up, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been listening so far. We're now on, well, we were and still are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating either place. And I just connected the YouTube. So we're not professionals by any means, but certainly not your husband and Evan, but we are.
We're learning.
We are learning. We're trying. We're doing our best, and we're so grateful to everyone. And I'm just grateful for you to
thank you so
come
much.
and talk. So, all right, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, and have a great day.